This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Hot Takes, where I react to your comments throughout the week. A ton of comments to get into, so let's jump into it. I argued with the internet about Kevin Stefanski. This one, this guy says, my definition for being outcoached is when an inferior roster into someone else's stadium and the clearly inferior quarterback on the road blows out that opponent. And not only is that the proper definition, but that is what happened. Again, my issue with the term outcoached is that it means 50 different things to 50 different people. That's what you feel like outcoached means. And that's a very specific definition of outcoach. So it's not something that's going to be used universally. So when you throw out outcoached in an argument, not just an opinion, if you threw it out an opinion, that's fine. But an argument is a little bit more substantial. You want to have some facts behind it. If you throw it out in an argument, the issue is that it's going to be misinterpreted. Right. The term is going to ultimately be misinterpreted because it's something that means a million different things to a million different people. And I would say that doing what you did there and just defining the term without using it makes more sense, because what you said is, hey, basically, I don't like it when a coach has a better roster and they go in and they get beat by a team that's not better than them. And it feels like the only reason they lost was because they got outmaneuvered by the other coach. That's a more compelling argument and a more understandable argument than just saying Kevin Stefanski got outcoached. And that was my whole point, is that explaining outcoached and what that means to you is more useful than just saying outcoached, because ultimately that term is meaningless. It means so much, it means nothing at the same time, right? The next comment comes from Lamont, who says you can't ask for arguments and call people asshole once they post one. No, I didn't call anybody asshole in that video, man. I didn't call anybody an asshole. I asked for arguments. I critiqued and replied to those arguments with what I felt like were fair points. But at no point did I insult anybody. At no point did I call anybody a name. And at no point did I call anybody an asshole. So please don't put words in my mouth in the comment section of my videos, because I do not appreciate that. But unfortunately, Lamont did. But I ain't calling nobody an asshole in that video. Chamrod says, to be fair, Q, this ain't school where it's mandatory to include objective evidence for opinions. Folks, for better or worse, can have an opinion that are based on nothing. Here's a novel thought. Just ignore them. I would say a majority of Browns fans are happy with Kevin Stefanski, and it's not a good barometer of a pulse of the fan base. If you need me to provide facts on this take, I won't. It's just my opinion. Here's the problem, though, Chamrod. And I don't know if you misunderstood the premise of the video, or maybe I didn't explain the premise of the video well enough at the start of it. But I was not asking for opinions. I was asking for arguments. Arguments are different than opinions. Opinions, you can just have. Everybody has opinions. Quick opinions, well thought out opinions, well researched opinions. There's a million different types of opinions. I'm not going to be mad at somebody for having an opinion, or even challenge somebody for simply having an opinion, especially if they're not asking for that opinion to be challenged. But in an argument where you are asking your opinion to be challenged, or you're challenging somebody else's opinion, then you do need stuff to back it up, because you're not simply having an opinion, you're making a argument. And that was the premise of this video. I was asking people to make an argument. And to this second paragraph, because I get this kind of comment a lot, and I think people who say this mean well. Here's a novel thought, just ignore them. I don't have the luxury of ignoring people in the discourse about the team, because it's my job to know what people are saying about the team and have a conversation about those things. So when people tell me just ignore it, it's like, well, do you want me just not to do my job? Do you want me just to stop uploading entirely, not make content anymore? Because if I did that, that's what would have to follow. I can't just ignore it. If you're a viewer, you can ignore these things. But for me, it's kind of my job to be in this space, listening to what people have to say and making arguments back or making points that are about what people are talking about right now. So respectfully, I disagree with this whole comment. And I think that this comment really misunderstood the premise of the video, which might be my own fault. Mandel Harvey says reasonable exaggeration. If someone expresses a number that's more poetic than the actual number, recognition, that is an objective or adverb, not a noun. Dude said 45 to convey emotion. Like Nick Sirianni says, Jalen Hurts, the target of the hit 50 times a game. Between dropbacks and runs, but it's created a level of it's to create a level of exasperation to where the number should mean not many. Like how tall was her boyfriend? 7 feet. It doesn't matter if he was 5'10". I'm 5'5". Time to flee. Reasonably exaggerated numbers express most. Okay, so you're explaining the concept of hyperbole to me. And I understand the concept of hyperbole, but here's the thing. Even in your own example, you point out why what that viewer said wasn't hyperbole. In your example, you said Jalen Hurts got hit 50 times in a game. Getting hit 50 times in a game for a quarterback is an absurd amount. For example, like Joe Burrow, people freak out when he takes 9 sacks. So getting hit 50 times a game would be literally insane. So it's hyperbolic. It's obviously hyperbolic. When Baker Mayfield had 38 pass attempts and you say 45, that's not hyperbole. That's not adding enough, because 145 pass attempts is a normal amount that gets thrown in football games every week. 2, it's not enough from the actual number to qualify as hyperbole. There's a difference between straight up lying and hyperbole. Hyperbole is called hyperbole and not lying because it's obvious and easy to detect. If you say some ridiculous number, like for example, you said how tall was her boyfriend and someone says, man, he was like 7'7". You know that's a lie, because if the brother was 7'7", he'd be in the NBA. When he's actually 5'5". That's hyperbole. But if I asked you how tall somebody was and they were 5'5", and you told me, yeah, they about 5'8", that's not hyperbole. That's just lying. There's deception in that, right? You added enough numbers there for it not to be, well, not you, that person added enough numbers in there for it not to be true, but also for it to not sound ridiculous. That is a lie. That's deception, right? The difference between hyperbole and a lie is that a lie is just enough to be deceptive. Hyperbole is enough to be obvious. Sarcasm. It should be clear that that person's obviously not telling the truth. They're just trying to make a point. That's the difference. Adding 7 pass attempts is a lie. Adding 70 pass attempts, that's hyperbole. I hope I got my point across clearly there. This next comment is long. So first point that Jay Breezy makes is about Kirk Cousins. You guys can read the whole point. If I read it, this might be my third take on this video. If I read it, the video is going to be like 45 minutes. So please pause the video, read the guy's take if you want to. So his first paragraph is about my point on Kirk Cousins. I think this gentleman misunderstood my point about Kirk Cousins. My point wasn't that there's no evidence that Kirk Cousins could have improved without Kevin Stefanski. My point was that it is debatable whether it is true if Kirk Cousins has ever been better without Kevin Stefanski. I proved that. I said the QBR, the playoff number, that's something that you didn't even try to dispute in here, which tells me that that's true. Again, I wasn't trying to say that there's no evidence at all that Kirk Cousins has been better. I would say that there is evidence that Kirk Cousins was better under Stefanski, and that makes that statement debatable and not an outright fact, because that the argument that we're referring to said that Kevin Stefanski made Kirk Cousins worse or something like that. There was a definitive statement about Kirk Cousins not being better, well, being better after he left Kevin Stefanski, which I was like, nah, that's debatable. It's not like a statement. I don't think you can just throw that out there. Statistically, Denver was one of the worst run defenses in the league. The Browns were running the ball against them, but didn't capitalize at all as far as the play calling is concerned. Okay, fair enough point. I mean, I don't think anybody's happy with how he play called in that Denver game. Nobody's calling that a Kevin Stefanski play calling masterpiece. My argument is just, hey man, people are allowed to have a bad game at play calling. Like that happens every week. Every year, every week, somebody has a bad game as a play caller that usually doesn't. Just because somebody has a bad game as a play caller, that doesn't mean that that person should never call plays again. Much like if a player has a bad game, that doesn't mean that that person gets benched. PJ Walker is by most advanced and basic statistics, is the worst quarterback in the league. He definitely shouldn't have been taking snaps in a live game. Again, this is another opinion stated as a fact. I don't think that's true. PJ Walker is a veteran quarterback who's been in the NFL. He's more than qualified to take snaps. I can name 3 quarterbacks I feel like he was better than: Clayton Tune, Jeff Driscoll, and what's his name? Tim Boyle, TB12 out there in New York. I would rather have PJ over him. So, man, and again, why are we so dead set on trying to make it seem like PJ deserves nothing but the worst? My man stepped in, won 2 big games, and did enough. Right? I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback in the world, but he does deserve some damn respect. And I've never seen fans so eager to disrespect somebody like they're disrespecting PJ Walker. And I don't think he deserves that. And honestly, it just feels very weird. The energy feels very weird about trying to go out of your way to disrespect PJ Walker. And not talking about you, Jay Brizzy. I don't think you were disrespecting him. You're just making an argument that you don't think he was a good quarterback, which, I mean, of course, he's PJ Walker. He's not supposed to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's a qualified backup quarterback. And that person said that he's not NFL quality. And again, that was my argument. He is NFL quality. You didn't do anything to debate that he wasn't NFL quality. And just because he ranked low in some stats doesn't mean he's not qualified to take snaps in a game when there have been worse quarterbacks who took snaps this season. So again, don't understand the obsession with PJ Walker, but fine. Baker, well, it's an exaggerated more than likely from the viewer, so I'm assuming we have to take everything you say now with validity. No exaggerations, only the truth. Again, there's a difference between hyperbole and straight up lying. Stop acting like we don't understand the difference. It's right there. Hyperbole, big exaggeration, obvious to detect, and a lie is when you're trying to advance your argument by manipulating the numbers a little bit and being deceptive and hoping nobody double checks what you're saying. And that's clearly what that person was doing, because 45 from 38 is not enough of an exaggeration to qualify as hyperbole, and nobody would reasonably think that that is hyperbole. So again, nah, I'm not buying that. This statement here about Kevin not coaching during the COVID week is just straight up wrong. If you don't remember, during the COVID week, the Browns were not allowed to meet because there was a COVID infection, which meant everything had to be done via Zoom. And Kevin was in charge of that process. There's multiple press conferences you can reference to where Kevin told people what the process was. All of the coaches' meetings, all of the players' meetings, everything that happened to game plan for that game happened on Zoom. Kevin was able to participate and take place in that. He even stated as much in his pregame presser. Kevin was a part of that, and trying to erase him from that is just outright ignoring what actually happened. So that's just a straight up lie right there. The next part of this, or at least I'm trying to get it up right now. All right. The next part of this is saying, what I'm getting at here is I'm able to research and create a video off the comment that somebody was typing in 30 seconds when they're pissed off. It's amazing for views, but it's a limited space. But there's limited space for arguing in here. Ironically enough, I'd like to mention that he probably typed 500 words. So there's clearly enough space to make a coherent argument on this platform. And again, I wasn't searching for people's drunk, angry takes after Browns games. I asked people specifically for their best argument against Kevin Stefanski. This is what people provided me. I did not go outside of that to find these arguments. I simply asked for arguments. They gave them to me. I responded to them, and I kind of went out my way to make sure I picked the most substantiated arguments that I could find. So I don't get what this point is. I understand I have a platform and it's easier for me to get my opinion out there, but still, I'm allowed to interact with the community. And not to mention your arguing opinions, but the whole channel is your opinion. Love the channel, but love the content. Appreciate the content. But if you expect people to be literal and not make hyperbole in an argument, we've seen you do it. It's kind of crazy. Again, but when I do hyperbole, I'm actually doing hyperbole. We know the difference between hyperbole and just straight up lying. Again, I don't know why that's such a difficult thing to get through. But we just disagree, I guess, on that, even though it's not something that can be disagreed on. Hyperbole, just look up the definition of it. It's an extreme exaggeration. So no. Don't really mess with that one. I'm not asking people to be extremely literal. If you want to come on here and be hyperbolic, I would absolutely recognize that you're being hyperbolic, but I wasn't being literal to be an asshole. It was close enough to where it was reasonable to anticipate that he was probably lying or not really knowing what the number was there that he was putting out. And again, I asked for these arguments. It took 5 seconds to find out how many pass attempts Baker Mayfield had in that game. I'm not here or against Kevin Stefanski. These points are fair, but I believe there was more accessible to the viewer in the candidate setting. You would see that. Again, I would love to know the better way to do this. If you have a better way, please let me know. But that's going to be it for this video on these comments. Let's get into some other comments from the Baker Mayfield paradox. It was a fun week of comments for me, a fun week of contrarian arguments being made against me. So this one from Joe says, Baker made Big Ben cry in the playoffs. If you're a true Browns fan, you would and should appreciate that moment. Baker memory will be very hard to top. Why can't somebody be critical of Baker Mayfield while also appreciating what he did? I bring up all the time, like, yeah, he brought us some highs. He did some good, but he also had some bad. Baker Mayfield wasn't just that one moment. His whole career wasn't just that one moment. His whole career was 4 seasons with the Cleveland Browns, and it had various ups and downs. And real Browns fans, however you deemed them, are allowed to feel how they feel about that, whether it be like you and they love Baker Mayfield or they don't love him because of what they experience with him there. I don't understand why people think that their memory of Baker Mayfield should be everybody's memory of Baker Mayfield, positive or negative. By the way, 1296 says there would be a decent argument if your statements were accurate. It's not 11 games. It's 2 full seasons, nearly $100 million invested, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions with no signs of improvement. If Baker had these results, he'd be outside of First Energy Stadium with a pitchfork. Well, Baker did have these results in 2019. Actually, he had pretty bad numbers in 2019. I was making videos in 2019, and because it was Baker Mayfield's second full season with the Cleveland Browns, I was making the argument that we needed to hold on and see what he's going to do in year 3 before we make any definitive arguments. It's funny when people get hypothetical with me about what I might have done in certain situations when there is video evidence on this channel of what I did in that hypothetical situation that they're making up and saying that I'm not going to have. And you can say, well, they didn't invest $100 million in Baker Mayfield. Sure, but they did invest the number 1 overall pick in a draft that by that point we saw Lamar Jackson win an MVP and Josh Allen become one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So the investment was strong. And even then, after Baker's terrible 2019, I wasn't making the argument for moving on from Baker Mayfield. I was actually making the same exact argument I'm making for Deshaun Watson and saying, hey, let's wait this out a little bit. We haven't seen enough. We saw some good. We saw some bad. Let's wait it out. It's funny how my approach is applauded by some people in 2019 being patient. But now I get called all kind of names for having the exact same approach that I had for Baker Mayfield in 2019. And if you don't believe me, look up any video I made in the 2020 offseason about Baker Mayfield. Look it up. It's there to find if you don't believe me. But I've always been on the side of you got to give things time. And I'm not going to change my mind on that just because it's a different quarterback. If this were any other quarterback, I would be like, hey, man, 11 games isn't enough to make a definitive statement on. And I don't know why so many people brought up his money. Like, the fact that the Browns are invested in him $100 million is more of a reason for the Browns to see this work out than to give up on it. But I digress there. I don't understand what the money has to do with it. It's just something people bring up when they hate him. And this is another one here. And again, if you hate Deshaun Watson, like, I don't mind that. Like, I understand why somebody would hate him. He has not been accused of great things off the field. Like, yeah, it's a reasonable opinion to have, but just have that opinion. Right? Like, that's fine. Buckeye says $230 million all guaranteed changes that dynamic. Again, the Browns invested a #1 overall pick in a quarterback heavy draft for Baker Mayfield. I can make the argument, honestly, that investing a #1 overall pick instead of going after a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson is more costly than giving Deshaun Watson $230 million all guaranteed. And even then, the $230 million all guaranteed really doesn't change the dynamic, because you had to commit to Baker Mayfield because you took him from #1 overall. And you have to commit to Deshaun Watson because you paid him $230 million. There's still a commitment there that you have to see through in order to see through it. And that's the argument people will make. Hey, he's a #1 overall pick. You have to see this through. Well, you spent $230 million. You got to see it through. It's the same argument. It's the exact same argument, y'all. It really is. Kevin Stefanski interviews Kellen Moore, but should he give up play calling? This one had a comment says, my whole problem with the discussion is the play calling is not one-sided. It's our play caller against their play caller. So if we call a good play and they call a better one, we called a bad one. Also, we called a bad play and they called a worse play, and we ran a good play. Sometimes it's different. I get what your whole point here is play calling. It's hard to judge play calling because the only way we can judge it is based off the result. And that's why I don't really care about it as much. Like, I think play calling is a symptom of a bigger problem, because what people are complaining about when they complain about play calling is usually bad offense. And bad offense isn't going to happen because the plays were called at the wrong time for a whole game. Bad offense is going to happen because the game planning for the game was lackluster. What was on the entire play sheet stunk, not just the specific play that they called at that time that was on the play sheet. If you do a good job preparing for a game, if you do a good job planning for a game and prepping for a game, and you have some good things cooked up, it don't matter what you call. You're probably going to call a good game because the odds are in your favor because you have the advantage because you cooked it up on them. But you know, if you have a terrible game plan, the play call is going to be terrible too. I'm not so obsessed with the play calling. I don't think the play calling is what's important. At the end of the day, Kevin's the head coach. If there's a big decision to be made, he's going to make it regardless of who's calling the plays. He's going to tell you we're going for 4th and 1 and this is what we're running or something like that, because that's what he's tasked to do. But when it comes to, like, that's why I don't really want to be super invested in who's calling the plays, because I think the process of how those plays get on the play sheet is so much more important than just what play gets called at what time. But that's it for the comments for this week's videos. Thank you guys for dropping those comments, even though, you know, some of you guys disagreed with me or didn't have the nicest things to say to me. I hope that we can disagree and move on amicably. But y'all have a great day. Even have a better night. Peace.